quite a
Okay,
bit of
let's
land
see.
to drag them across.
Some bit of land.
And presumably they used greased rollers.
Grease
And an
rollers.
awful lot of manpower. But again, we don't know.
Manpower.
Once people have actually got the stones to the site at Stonehenge, the next major problem
Stonehenge.
is how do you lift them up in the air?
You're going to tell us.
And the only way I can think that you would do that is that you would make a ramp and you would drag them up the ramp and then tip them off the end.
Okay.
That's a massive undertaking. So we're talking about thousands of people involved creating Stonehenge.
Thousands.
And these people are working 150 miles apart. Just imagine how complex those logistics are. We may never really know how they did it.
First off, I'm sure there was a little more people than what you're showing in your little video here. Second off, back then they worked for a common interest. You know, they all believed a certain way. They didn't have to go to work, and they weren't driving cars, and they weren't doing all this stuff. It's funny you show all people. What about animals? They had animals back then, I'm sure. I mean, I might be wrong. Maybe I'm totally stupid. I don't have a college education like you. But, I mean, in fairness, I think that they probably did. It's just a guess. But I'm sure they did. And, you know, they probably used those too. I mean, one horse can pull more weight than one human being. I mean, how come you're not saying that? I mean, that makes sense to me. What kind of education do you got? Apparently not a good one. Because back then, you didn't go to work like we do today. They didn't pay for things the way they do today. I'm sure they traded and stuff, and I'm sure things happened and whatever, but it wasn't like today. And when you were building something like Stonehenge, you came together as a people. 1,000, 2,000, whatever, 3,000 people came together. But they also had horses and mules and donkeys or whatever. And they had a common goal, a common interest, and they believed a certain way. So I am not 100% sure, but pretty sure that animals were involved. And it's funny that you think, with the education you have, that you think that there was no animals involved. There was all people power. No animal power at all. Just people. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The fact that you're like, well, you know, people were spread apart. They were 150 miles apart. We know that stones from Stonehenge came from a distance. I don't know exactly how far, but it's pretty far. And people had to go 100 miles or whatever to get these stones and then go 100 miles back to bring them to where they were going to build Stonehenge. You think that people didn't come from 150 miles over? That would be such an undertaking to do, to gather up some supplies, throw it on a horse, and take your horse or mule or whatever and go and help do this. You have a common belief and you have a common goal that a couple thousand people are going to come together. They probably have a couple thousand animals, or at least 1,000 animals on top of it. They can move these. The fact that you're like, I don't know how they did it. They're not bright enough to do that. It's just silly to me. I mean, they're smart enough to build this and get this stones cut and put this together and come up with a plan to do that, but they ignore the fact that how they got to this spot was most likely with an animal, and they go, well, we're not going to use the animals. I mean, just seems silly to me. I mean, what kind of education you got? You better call them up and get your money back, because my guess is the simplest one, which is animal power was probably used. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. You don't need to make it all complicated and make it all confusing, because sometimes the simple way is the best way, and that is animal power all the way.